Welcome everybody, my name is Ankit Patel and today we are going to study about nutrient cycling and ecosystem services. In Indian philosophy, we do say that we are made up of, or living organisms are made up of 5 elements. And today we are going to talk about 2 elements from these 5 elements and they are air and earth. When we sing earth, it means soil, rocks, etc. Right? What is present as the part of earth's crust. Understood? So we are going to talk about these 2 components, and when we are saying that we are made up of these 2 elements, it means there are certain chemicals present in these 2 elements comes in biotic component, that is they comes in body of living organisms. Understood? And from this from body of living organisms, it is going back to these 2 component, that is air and earth. Understood? Which means nutrient cycling, right? Movements of different chemicals between these 2 components, and this is nothing but nutrient cycling. So let's start this topic, but in this topic we will study about some definitions as well, like what are standing state, what is nutrient recycling. We will clarify the term biogeochemical cycle. We will also study that what kind of climatic factors are affecting, or are they affecting or not. Then we will study about different types of nutrient recycling. We will study about what is meant by reservoir when we talk about cycling, right? So let's start with first definition, that is standing state. Amount of any nutrient present in soil at a particular time is called standing state of that element for a particular time. Now obviously standing state varies with different ecosystems and it varies with different seasons as well. Understood? So this is about standing state. Nutrient cycling means movement of nutrients from among different components, that is biotic component and abiotic component in an ecosystem, is called nutrient cycling, right? So that is what is called nutrient cycling, right? Now next is biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycle means bio means living organism, geo means abiotic component which includes air and soil or earth crust. So this is called biogeochemical cycle, as chemicals are moving, right? So this is called biogeochemical cycles. Understood? And this nutrient cycle is divided into 2 parts. First is gaseous cycle and another one is sedimentary cycle. Right? In gaseous cycle, carbon is there, then oxygen cycle belongs to gaseous cycle, wherein reservoir is nothing but air. Understood? And sedimentary cycle are cycle of phosphorus, then sulfur cycle. All this kind of cycle belongs to sedimentary cycle, where reservoir is earth's crust. So depending on what reservoir do the particular chemical or particular nutrient is having, they are classified into different type of cycle, that is the sedimentary cycle or gaseous cycle, right? Now what are these reservoir and what are the function of this reservoir? These reservoirs are having huge amount of particular type of chemical, and this reservoir functions to provide this kind of nutrient during deficit of that particular nutrient, right? Due to imbalance in influx or efflux in the atmosphere. So this is what is function of reservoir. Now let's study about different type of cycle, let's study about 2 cycles here. One is called carbon cycle and another one is phosphorus cycle. If we see amount of carbon in any living organism, it is 49% of its dry weight. So it means after water, carbon comes in second most abundant substance or chemical which can be found in any living organism, right? Obviously all organic compounds are having backbone of carbon. So carbon is most abundant chemical present in any living organism, that is 49% of its dry weight, and remaining dry weight is of oxygen, nitrogen and other elements, right? If we talk about biosphere, that how much amount of carbon is there in biosphere, then it is also 4 multiplied by 10 power 13 kg. It is a huge amount of carbon which is fixed by pleiotropic organisms in the biosphere. Understood? So this much amount of carbon is there in biosphere. Now let's talk about how much carbon is there in and how carbon is distributed in the abiotic component. 71% of all carbon present in the environment is there in the ocean, as dissolved carbon. Understood? So they are dissolved in the form of carbon dioxide in the ocean, right? Because carbon dioxide is fairly dissolved in water, and in water it did convert into carbonate or bicarbonate ions. And when it gets dissolved in water, they are used up by photosynthetic organisms present in this ocean reservoir, this ocean, and they can be used, they are used up by some marine animals which are producing shells of calcium carbonate. So in both this process, that is formation of calcium carbonate shells, and in photosynthetic process, this carbon get used up and they are added in the biotic component of ecosystem. As this carbon is added in photosynthetic organism by photosynthesis process, so it had entered in first trophic level in biotic component, it will move to the successive trophic levels in that ecosystem. That means it will move from phototrophic level to primary consumer, then to secondary consumer, then to tertiary consumer, and so on. Finally, it comes to decomposers also. This decomposer, we know that these decomposers are decomposing dead organic matter and excreta also. So they will convert complex organic matter into simpler chemicals, which results in formation of simpler carbon compounds, and again this carbon will be added in the atmosphere. Beside this, carbon is also added in the atmosphere by respiratory loss through each trophic level. We know that each and every type of organisms are producing carbon dioxide as respiratory loss, except some anaerobic organisms, right? Because they are producing ethanol. They are also producing carbon dioxide with ethanol. So all organisms, including those who are doing anaerobic respiration, all these organisms are producing carbon dioxide as respiratory loss. Understood? And this carbon dioxide is added in the atmosphere again. Understood? Furthermore, due to certain human activities like burning of fossil fuel, burning of wood, then sometimes due to fire forest, huge amount of carbon dioxide is added in the environment. Even during natural calamities like volcanic eruption, there is again a huge amount of addition of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So all this, due to all these processes, carbon is added in the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. But there are certain processes also in which carbon comes out, or carbon element is excluded from the carbon cycle, and that is due to sedimentation of carbon, that is due to sediment of carbon. So this is about whole carbon cycle and how carbon get lost in the environment and how they are again coming back in the biosphere. Understood? So this is how whole carbon moves. And again, this is also important to remember that how carbon get excluded in form of sediments from the carbon cycle. Next is phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus cycle is a kind of sedimentary cycle because reservoir of phosphorus is there in the rocks. That's why it is called sedimentary cycle. In living organisms, there are certain chemicals in which this phosphorus is very essential structural component. For example, phospholipid molecules which is present in cell membrane. Adenosine triphosphate which is present as energy currency in living organism, right? To obtain energy, to exchange energy between different chemicals in a cell or between cells. Understood? And it is also present in one of the most important component, one of the most important chemical in living organism, that is nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. So this phosphorus is very, very essential for living organisms. Phosphorus is added in the environment, or reservoir of phosphorus are rocks. When rainfall is occurring, this phosphorus is added in the water by washed off phosphorus from the rocks, right? And then this phosphorus is added to the soil, and from soil, through soil, it is added in the, it is absorbed by the plant. And as it enter in the first trophic level, that is phototrophic organisms, it will again succeed. It will succeed in other trophic levels as well. That is, from phototrophic organisms, it will goes to primary consumers, then secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and finally to decomposers. Right? During each trophic level, this phosphorus molecule will be used up in different type of processes. Here, respiratory loss of phosphorus will not occur. So this phosphate molecules will go to the next trophic level, and this ultimately this phosphorus will be added in the soil by decomposers, because these decomposers which are having bacteria containing phosphorus solubilizing chemicals which will convert phosphate into phosphorus, and this elemental phosphorus will added in the soil by through these decomposers, right? These decomposers are bacteria having phosphorus solubilizing chemicals which will convert phosphate molecule into elemental phosphorus, and this elemental phosphorus is added in the atmosphere again, in the soil again. So that is how this phosphorus is moving in the phosphorus cycle. Understood? So this is about phosphorus cycle. Now it is also very important to know that what is difference between carbon cycle and phosphorus cycle. The very first difference is very easier, that carbon cycle is a gaseous cycle and phosphorus cycle is sedimentary cycle. Second is also easier, that carbon get lost from the biosphere through respiratory loss. I mean, carbon is added to the atmosphere from biosphere through respiratory loss. No such thing can be found in phosphorus cycle, right? Phosphorus cannot be lost from the biosphere through respiratory loss. Understood? And third one is atmospheric input of carbon through rainfall is much higher than atmospheric input of phosphorus through rainfall, right? So in carbon this input is much higher than in phosphorus. So these are the three differences which you need to remember. So this is our nutrient cycling, in which we will study about, in which we will remember two cycles, that is carbon cycle, a gaseous cycle, and phosphorus cycle, a sedimentary cycle. Now next is ecosystem services. A healthy ecosystem is base for variety of economical, environmental and aesthetic products and services. The products which we are getting from ecosystem processes are called ecosystem services. For example, a healthy forest ecosystem can provide us good quality of air, good quality of water reservoirs, it will help in mitigating with floods and droughts. It will help in conservation of forest, conservation of wildlife and wildlife habitats. It will also help in pollination of crops, storing site of, it will provide storage, it provide us storage site for carbon, and it also provide us aesthetic, cultural and spiritual values. And so we need to determine what should be the cost of all these ecosystem services if we have to create this by ourselves. Right now we are getting from the environment, we are getting from the forest ecosystem, but if we have to create this by ourselves, then what should be its cost? Obviously to determine this cost is difficult, but we need to find this cost. And this cost, according to Robert Constanza and his colleague, is $33 trillion a year, which is almost twice of gross global national product, gross GNP, that is $18 trillion. Still, we don't give much to the ecosystem services. We have just taken granted what we are getting from ecosystem services, right? And out of all this cost, 50% cost is accounted for soil formation. Less than 10% of this cost, that is $33 trillion per year, out of this 10% for each recreation and nutrient cycling, right, and 6% for each wildlife habitat formation and climate regulation, right, which almost makes up 80% of total cost. So this is required for creating ecosystem services by ourselves if we don't get this thing from nature, right? So we should take care of these ecosystems, and we should not harm the forest ecosystems, or we should not do pollution which is really harming this ecosystem, right? So this is the end of ecosystem services, and by now we have completed this chapter. Now we will start new chapter in next video. So goodbye for now.